The hopeless battlefield. The skies were dark with smoke. Explosions shook the ground, and the air was filled with the screams of the wounded. The alien alliance, made up of different species from across the galaxy, was losing. Their weapons were useless against the Zorak, a cruel and powerful enemy. The Zorak had no mercy. They destroyed everything in their path: cities, ships, and people. Commander Ralvik of the Drakti stood on the command deck, staring at the holographic map. The red dots, their enemies, were everywhere. The blue dots, his forces, were disappearing one by one. His scaled hands clenched into fists. He knew defeat was certain. "Sir," said Lieutenant Sarah, her voice shaking, "the Eastern Front has fallen. The Zorak are advancing." Ralvik closed his eyes. That was their last defense. "How many troops do we have left?" he asked quietly. "Less than 5,000, she replied. "Against their 50,000. Ralvik sighed. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The Alliance had fought bravely, but it wasn't enough. The Zorak's technology was too advanced. Their soldiers were ruthless, their ships indestructible. Every tactic the Alliance tried had failed. The war room was silent. The other commanders, from the Varnak, the Yulin, and the Tarsk, stood around the table, their faces grim. They all knew what was coming. Total defeat. "Prepare for evacuation," Ralvik ordered. "Save whoever you can." But deep down, he knew there was no escape. The Zorak would hunt them down. This was the end. Suddenly, a loud beep interrupted the silence. Everyone turned toward the communication console. "What is that?" Sarah asked, frowning. "Incoming transmission," said the technician, his voice confused. "But it's from an unknown source." Ralvik's eyes narrowed. "Put it on screen." The hologram flickered, and a strange figure appeared. It was a species none of them had seen before, a human. The being had smooth skin, no scales, no fur, just a plain face with sharp eyes and a calm expression. "This is Captain Marcus Steele of the Terran Federation," the figure said. "We hear you have a Zorak problem." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the room erupted in laughter. "Is this a joke?" barked General Varn of the Varnak, his tusks gleaming. "What can these creatures do against the Zorak?" "Are you lost?" sneered Commander Yulra of the Yulin. "This is no place for weaklings." But Ralvik didn't laugh. He stared at the human, studying his face. There was no fear in those eyes, only confidence. "What do you want, human?" Ralvik asked. Captain Steele smiled. "To help." "Help?" Varn snorted. "With what?" "Your primitive weapons." Steele's smile didn't fade. "Let us show you what humans can do." The transmission ended, and for a moment, the room was silent again. Then Sarah spoke. "Should we trust them?" she asked. Ralvik thought for a long moment. They had nothing left to lose. "Bring them in," he said. "Let's see what these humans are made of." Hours later, strange ships descended from the sky. They were smaller and less advanced-looking than the Alliance's ships, but they moved with a kind of precision and speed that was unsettling. When the humans disembarked, the alien commanders gathered to meet them. Captain Steele stepped forward, flanked by his soldiers. They didn't look like much. No heavy armor, no flashy weapons. Just simple gear and calm faces. But there was something in their eyes, something the alien commanders couldn't understand. Ralvik approached Steele. "You say you can help," he said. "How?" Steele pulled out a small device and projected a hologram of the battlefield. But the plan he showed them was unlike anything they had seen before. It wasn't about brute force or advanced technology. It was about strategy, about outsmarting the Zorak. "We'll hit them where it hurts," Steele explained. "We'll use their strength against them." The alien commanders exchanged doubtful looks, but Ralvik felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, these humans could do the impossible. "Very well," Ralvik said. "Show us what you can do." And with that, the humans prepared for their first strike, a move that would change the course of the war forever. The first human strike. The alien alliance watched in silence as the humans prepared for battle. The alien commanders still doubted them. How could these fragile-looking creatures succeed where the strongest warriors in the galaxy have failed? Their ships were smaller, their weapons seemed outdated, and yet there was something about them. A quiet confidence, a calm before the storm. Captain Marcus Steele gathered his team in the strategy room. The holographic map of the battlefield glowed in the dim light. His voice was steady, clear. "The Zorak are predictable," he began. "They rely on their power, their numbers, but they underestimate us. That's their weakness." His soldiers nodded, their faces serious. They had done this before. Earth had faced impossible odds in the past, and every time, humans had survived. Not because they were the strongest, but because they were the smartest. The plan was simple, yet daring. The humans would split into small, fast-moving units and strike the Zorak from unexpected angles. They would use the environment against them, turning the battlefield into a deadly trap. Phase 1. Distraction. The first human team, led by Lieutenant Avachen, approached the Zorak supply convoy under cover of darkness. Using stealth technology, they slipped past enemy sensors. With precise timing, they planted explosives on key supply ships. At dawn, the charges detonated in a series of massive explosions. The Zorak, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. Their forces moved chaotically, trying to figure out where the attack had come from. Phase 2. Ambush. As the Zorak shifted their focus to the destroyed convoy, Captain Steele's main force moved in from the opposite direction. They targeted a key Zorak command post, hidden deep within a canyon. But instead of a direct assault, the humans used guerrilla tactics. They set traps along the canyon walls, mines, collapsible rock structures, and EMP devices to disable Zorak tech. When the Zorak forces entered the canyon, thinking they had cornered the humans, they walked right into the trap. The walls exploded, burying many of them under tons of rock. EMP blasts shut down their advanced weapons. In the confusion, human soldiers attacked with speed and precision, taking out the remaining Zorak one by one. Phase 3. The turning point. By the time the Zorak realized what was happening, it was too late. Their convoy was destroyed, their command post wiped out, and their troops demoralized. For the first time in the war, the Zorak faced something they didn't understand: defeat. From the command center, Commander Ralvik and the other alien leaders watched the battle unfold on the holographic screens. Their disbelief turned to awe. They did it," whispered General Varn, his tusks twitching in surprise. "They actually did it." Ralvik couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. He saw the humans moving with perfect coordination, striking with deadly efficiency. They weren't the biggest or the strongest, but they were unstoppable. When the battle ended, Captain Steele returned to the Alliance headquarters. His uniform was dusty, but his eyes were bright. "That's just the beginning," he said, looking at the stunned alien commanders. "We're not done yet." The room was silent for a moment. Then Ralvik stepped forward. For the first time since the war began, he felt hope. "What's next?" he asked. Steele's smile returned, calm and confident. "Now," he said, "we take the fight to them." And with that, the humans began to plan their next move, a strike that would not only win battles but turn the entire war in their favor. Turning the tide. The alien alliance was no longer laughing. The humans had done the impossible. They had beaten the Zorak in a battle no one thought could be won. But Captain Steele knew this was only the beginning. The Zorak would not stay confused for long. They were already adapting. In the war room, the holographic map flickered with new red markers. Zorak reinforcements were on the move. Their forces were regrouping, planning a massive counterattack. "They're learning," Steele said, pointing at the shifting enemy positions. They won't fall for the same tricks twice. Commander Ralvik frowned, his scaled face tense. Then what do we do? Steele smiled, a spark of determination in his eyes. We stay unpredictable. The new strategy. The humans introduced tactics the Alliance had never considered. Instead of large battles, they focused on hit-and-run attacks, decoy maneuvers, and electronic warfare. They hacked into Zorak communication systems, feeding them false information and leading them into traps. Lieutenant Ava Chen led a team to sabotage a Zorak fuel depot. Disguised as a retreating Alliance squad, they lured the Zorak into a narrow canyon, then detonated hidden explosives, causing a chain reaction that destroyed half the enemy's fuel supply. Meanwhile, Captain Steele coordinated a series of feints. He made it look like the Alliance was massing for an attack in one sector, while the real strike hit the Zorak's logistics hub deep behind enemy lines. The Zorak were forced to split their forces, weakening their front lines. Allies learned from humans. The alien commanders watched and learned. At first, they were skeptical of human tactics, but as victory followed victory, their doubt turned into admiration. General Varn, once dismissive of the humans, began incorporating guerrilla warfare into his own battle plans. These humans, he growled, they think like predators. Commander Yulra of the Yulin, known for her rigid strategies, adapted her fleets to be more flexible, using hit-and-fade techniques inspired by human raids. Even Ralvik found himself relying on Steele's advice more and more. The Alliance wasn't just surviving. They were starting to win. The Zorak strike back. But the Zorak were not fools. Their leaders, the cold and calculating overseers, recognized the threat the humans posed. They developed new countermeasures, reinforcing their supply lines and deploying advanced tracking drones to hunt down the elusive human teams. Then came the Zorak's most dangerous move yet. They targeted the Alliance's morale. They began broadcasting propaganda, showing images of destroyed Alliance cities, captured soldiers, and promises of total annihilation. The Alliance forces grew uneasy. Even with the humans' help, they were still vastly outnumbered. The fear that had once gripped them began to return. The surprise attack. Steele knew they had to act fast. The Zorak were adapting too quickly, and the Alliance couldn't afford to lose momentum. So he proposed a bold, dangerous plan. An attack on a Zorak command ship deep in enemy territory. It's risky, Ralvik said, studying the plan. If we fail, we're no worse off than we are now, Steele replied. But if we succeed, we'll deal a blow they won't recover from. The plan was approved. Steele and a small team of elite soldiers, humans, and aliens together, infiltrated the Zorak fleet. Using stolen Zorak codes, they slipped past the outer defenses. But just as they reached the command ship, an alarm blared. The Zorak had been expecting them. A battle in the shadows. Trapped deep in enemy space, Steele and his team had to fight their way to the ship's core. The corridors echoed with gunfire and alien screams. The Zorak were everywhere, but the humans' quick thinking and the Alliance's diverse skills kept them alive. Finally, they reached the command center. Steele planted an explosive device on the ship's main reactor, but just as they were about to escape, a towering Zorak overseer blocked their path. The overseer was massive, its armor thick and nearly impenetrable. The team fought desperately, but their weapons barely scratched it. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Lieutenant Chen spotted a weak point in the overseer's armor. With a precise shot, she hit the target, and the overseer collapsed. The team raced to their escape pods, launching into space just as the command ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. A new hope. The destruction of the Zorak command ship sent shockwaves through their ranks. The Zorak fleet faltered, their leadership in chaos. The Alliance seized the moment, launching a coordinated offensive across multiple fronts. For the first time since the war began, the Zorak were on the defensive. Back at the Alliance headquarters, Ralvik watched the reports roll in. victory after victory. He turned to Captain Steele, his respect clear. "You've changed everything," he said. Steele shook his head. "We did this together." But deep down, Ralvik knew the truth. The humans had turned the tide of the war, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Zorak's deadly trap. The victories came fast, but Captain Steele knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Zorak were a formidable enemy, defeated, yes, but not broken. The Alliance had gained ground, but the war was far from over. In the dim glow of the strategy room, Steele studied the latest intelligence reports. The Zorak were retreating, but something felt wrong. Their movements were too orderly, too controlled. Commander Ralvik entered the room, his sharp eyes narrowing as he noticed Steele's tense expression. "What is it?" Ralvik asked. Steele pointed at the holographic map. "They're not just retreating," he said. "They're baiting us." Ralvik's scales bristled. "A trap." Steele nodded. "A big one." The Alliance walks into the trap. Despite Steele's warnings, the Alliance leaders were eager to press their advantage. The taste of victory was too sweet, and the idea of a final push to end the war was too tempting. "We can crush them now," General Varn insisted. "One more strike, and they'll be finished." Steele disagreed, but he couldn't stop the momentum. The Alliance fleet mobilized for a massive assault on what they believed was the Zorak's last stronghold, a heavily fortified planet deep within enemy territory. As the fleet entered Zorak space, everything seemed too quiet. No resistance, no sign of the usual Zorak ambushes. Then, as the Alliance forces descended on the planet, the trap was sprung. The ambush. From hidden bases and cloaked ships, the Zorak launched a devastating counterattack. Thousands of enemy ships appeared from nowhere, surrounding the Alliance fleet. Advanced Zorak weaponry tore through the Alliance ships, disabling their shields and crippling their engines. On the ground, the situation was worse. The Alliance troops found themselves trapped in a massive energy field that cut off communication and reinforcements. Zorak soldiers poured in from underground tunnels, overwhelming the Alliance's defensive lines. In the command ship, Steele watched in horror as the fleet's status indicators turned from blue to red. One by one, ships were destroyed or disabled. The Alliance was being crushed. The desperate gamble. Steele knew they had to act fast. Conventional tactics wouldn't work. The Zorak had planned for that. They needed something unexpected. "We're going to flip the trap," Steele said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. Ralvik frowned. "How?" Steele outlined his plan. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. Step 1. The Alliance fleet would fake a total collapse, sending distress signals and scattering in different directions to make it look like they were in full retreat. Step 2. A small team, led by Steele and Ralvik, would infiltrate the Zorak's central command station, hidden beneath the planet's surface. Their mission: to disable the Zorak's energy field and disrupt their fleet's coordination. Step 3. Once the field was down, the scattered Alliance forces would regroup and launch a surprise counterattack. Infiltration. The infiltration team, a mix of human and alien soldiers, descended onto the planet in stealth ships. They navigated through treacherous underground tunnels, avoiding Zorak patrols and deadly traps. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. The tunnels were narrow and dark, filled with the echoing sounds of distant Zorak movements. At one point, they had to crawl through a collapsed passageway, barely escaping detection. Finally, they reached the Zorak Command Center, a massive underground chamber pulsing with alien technology. At its heart was the control nexus, the source of the energy field trapping the Alliance forces. But as they approached, they triggered a hidden sensor. Alarms blared, and Zorak guards swarmed the chamber. The final fight. The team fought fiercely, but the odds were against them. The Zorak were relentless, their advanced weapons cutting through the team's defenses. Steele and Ralvik reached the control nexus, but they were pinned down. The energy field's core was protected by an impenetrable shield. "We need to overload the system," Steele shouted over the noise. "But we'll have to do it manually." Ralvik looked at him, understanding the risk. "I'll cover you," Ralvik said. Steele nodded and sprinted toward the core, dodging enemy fire. He reached the control panel and began hacking into the system, bypassing layers of Zorak security protocols. Time was running out. The Zorak were closing in. With a final command, Steele overloaded the system. The core exploded in a burst of energy, disabling the field and sending a shockwave through the Zorak's network. But Steele was caught in the blast, thrown across the chamber, turning the trap. Above the planet, the Alliance fleet saw their chance. The energy field flickered and died, and communication was restored. "This is our moment," General Varn growled. "Attack." The Alliance forces regrouped and launched a fierce counterattack. The Zorak, disoriented by the loss of their command network, struggled to respond. One by one, their ships fell, and their ground forces were pushed back. Back in the command center, Ralvik dragged an injured Steele to safety as the remaining Zorak forces retreated. The trap had been reversed. Aftermath. The battle was won, but the cost was high. Thousands of lives were lost, and many ships were destroyed. But the Alliance had survived the Zorak's deadliest trap, and they had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humans and their allies could adapt and overcome. As Steele recovered from his injuries, Ralvik stood by his side. "You turned their trap against them," Ralvik said. "You saved us all." Steele smiled weakly. "This war isn't over," he said. "But we just showed them we're not going down without a fight." And with that, the Alliance prepared for the next phase of the war, stronger, smarter, and more united than ever. The final stand. The Alliance had survived the Zorak's deadliest trap, but the war was far from over. The Zorak were furious, their pride wounded by the unexpected human resistance. They retreated temporarily, but it was clear they were preparing for something bigger, a final, devastating assault. In the aftermath of the battle, the Alliance regrouped. Ships were repaired, soldiers tended to their wounds, and new strategies were drawn. But everyone knew the truth. The next battle would decide everything. Captain Marcus Steele, still recovering from his injuries, stood in the Alliance war room, surrounded by commanders from every allied species. The room was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. "They're coming," Steele said, his voice steady. "And this time, they won't hold back." Commander Ralvik nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic map. The Zorak fleet was massive, far larger than anything the Alliance had faced before. "We need a plan," General Varn growled, his tusks glinting in the dim light. "A real one." Steele took a deep breath. He had been thinking about this moment since the first battle. He knew the Zorak's strengths and their weaknesses. "We're going to use their pride against them," he said. "They expect us to fight head-on, but we won't." The desperate plan. Steele outlined a risky, unconventional strategy. The Alliance would fake a retreat, drawing the Zorak deeper into Allied space. While the Zorak pursued, the Alliance would deploy hidden strike teams to sabotage the enemy's key supply lines and communication hubs. Meanwhile, a fleet of cloaked ships would position themselves behind the Zorak forces. Once the enemy was fully committed, the Alliance would launch a two-front assault, trapping the Zorak between their main fleet and the hidden forces. "It's dangerous," Commander Yulra said, her voice sharp. "If they see through it." "If they see through it, we're finished," Steele admitted. "But it's our best shot." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the commanders nodded. They were all in, preparing for the final battle. The Alliance worked tirelessly. Ships were modified with stealth technology, and soldiers trained for the covert operations ahead. Morale was high, but so was the tension. Everyone knew this could be their last stand. Steele spent long hours with his team, fine-tuning the plan. He knew every detail had to be perfect. Any mistake could mean disaster. "We're not just fighting for survival," he told his team. "We're fighting for our future." The Zorak's arrival. The Zorak fleet arrived in a terrifying display of power. Thousands of ships blotted out the stars, their weapons charged and ready. The Alliance fleet, significantly smaller, met them at the edge of Allied space. As planned, the Alliance began a strategic retreat, falling back toward their hidden positions. The Zorak, confident in their superiority, pursued aggressively. But what the Zorak didn't know was that every step they took deeper into Allied space brought them closer to the trap. The hidden strike. As the Zorak advanced, the hidden Alliance strike teams moved into action. They infiltrated Zorak supply ships, planting explosives and sabotaging key systems. Communication hubs were hacked, causing confusion among the enemy ranks. In one daring mission, Lieutenant Ava Chen and her team disabled a Zorak command ship, cutting off a crucial part of their fleet's coordination. The Zorak began to falter, their once perfect formations breaking apart. Meanwhile, the cloaked fleet moved into position behind the Zorak, waiting for Steele's signal. The trap springs. When the Zorak were fully committed, Steele gave the order. Now, the Alliance fleet stopped retreating and launched a full-scale assault. At the same time, the hidden fleet decloaked behind the Zorak and attacked from the rear. Caught between two fronts, the Zorak were thrown into chaos. Their massive fleet, once unstoppable, struggled to adapt to the unexpected assault. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, and the once organized Zorak forces fell into disarray. But the Zorak weren't defeated yet. They'd regrouped quickly, focusing their firepower on breaking through the Alliance's front line. The climactic battle. The final phase of the battle was brutal. The Alliance fought with everything they had, but the Zorak's numbers were overwhelming. Ships on both sides were destroyed, and the battlefield was filled with debris and fire. Steele's ship took heavy damage, but he refused to retreat. He coordinated the fleet's movements, finding weak points in the Zorak's formations and exploiting them. On the ground, Ralvik and his forces fought hand-to-hand with Zorak soldiers, their determination unwavering. They knew this was their last chance. In a final, desperate move, Steele ordered a direct assault on the Zorak flagship. It was a suicide mission, but if they could take out the Zorak's leader, the enemy might collapse. The turning point. Steele and a small team boarded the Zorak flagship, fighting their way to the command center. The Zorak leader, a massive, armored overseer, awaited them. The battle was fierce. The overseer was nearly invincible, but Steele and his team fought with everything they had. Finally, with a coordinated attack, they'd managed to breach the overseer's defenses. Steele delivered the final blow, and the overseer fell. The Zorak fleet, seeing their leader defeated, began to retreat in disarray. Victory, but at a cost. The Alliance had won, but the cost was unimaginable. Thousands of soldiers had died, and many ships were lost. The battlefield was a graveyard of metal and fire. As the surviving Alliance forces regrouped, Steele stood on the deck of his damaged ship, looking out at the wreckage. "We did it," Ralvik said quietly, standing beside him. Steele nodded. "But the price?" Ralvik placed a hand on Steele's shoulder. "The price was worth it. We're free." The war was over, but the scars would remain. The galaxy had been forever changed by the humans' courage and ingenuity. They had turned the tide of a hopeless war and proven that, even against impossible odds, humanity's spirit could not be broken. And as the Alliance began to rebuild, one thing was clear: the humans had earned their place among the stars. Victory, at a price. The war was over, but the galaxy was far from at peace. The Zorak had been defeated, their fleet scattered, and their leader slain. Yet the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of countless lives lost, both human and alien. The price of victory was heavier than anyone had imagined. Captain Marcus Steele stood on the observation deck of his damaged ship, gazing out at the remnants of the final battle. Twisted metal, shattered ships, and drifting bodies floated in the silent void. The stars, once symbols of hope and endless possibilities, now seemed to flicker with sorrow. Commander Ralvik approached, his scaled face somber. "We won," Ralvik said quietly. Steele nodded but didn't smile. At what cost? The aftermath of war. The Alliance gathered to mourn their dead and honor their heroes. Memorials were held on every Allied world, each one echoing with the names of those who had fallen. The victories were celebrated, but the grief ran deep. Lieutenant Ava Chen, who had played a pivotal role in the sabotage missions, stood beside Steele during the ceremonies. Her usually sharp eyes were dimmed with exhaustion and loss. "We did what we had to do," she whispered, "but it doesn't feel like a victory." Steele placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Because we know what it cost." The Alliance's new reality. With the Zorak threat gone, the Alliance faced a new challenge: rebuilding. Entire planets had been devastated, cities reduced to rubble, and populations decimated. The war had united the different species, but peace brought its own set of difficulties. Tensions began to rise as old rivalries resurfaced. Some worlds demanded more resources for rebuilding, while others argued over territorial claims. The unity forged in the fires of war was beginning to crack. Captain Steele and Commander Ralvik were tasked with leading a coalition to maintain peace and stability. They traveled from planet to planet, mediating disputes and encouraging cooperation. "We can't let what we've built fall apart," Steele said during one heated negotiation. "We didn't fight the Zorak just to destroy ourselves afterward." Ralvik added, "Our strength was in our unity. We must remember that." The hidden threat. But while the Alliance struggled to hold itself together, a new danger was brewing in the shadows. Unbeknownst to Steele and Ralvik, remnants of the Zorak were regrouping in the far reaches of the galaxy. Leaderless but not defeated, they were plotting their revenge. Meanwhile, whispers of a new, mysterious force began to circulate. Strange energy readings were detected on the edge of known space, and entire colonies were disappearing without a trace. Lieutenant Chen was the first to notice the pattern. "This isn't the Zorak," she said, studying the reports. "Something else is out there." Steele frowned. "Whatever it is, we need to be ready." Personal sacrifices. As the galaxy struggled to heal, Steele faced personal challenges as well. The weight of command and the loss of so many comrades had taken a toll on him. Nights were restless, haunted by the faces of those he couldn't save. Ralvik, too, struggled with the aftermath. His people had lost entire generations in the war, and as their leader, he felt the burden of rebuilding their future. One evening, as they stood together overlooking a memorial site, Ralvik spoke quietly. "Do you ever wonder if it was worth it?" he asked. Steele was silent for a long moment before replying. "Every day," he admitted, "but we did what we had to. And now we have to keep fighting for peace." A glimmer of hope. Amidst the sorrow and challenges, there were moments of hope. New alliances were formed, and once divided species began to work together to rebuild their worlds. Children who had only known war began to experience peace. Scientists and engineers, once focused on weapons and defense, turned their attention to rebuilding infrastructure and advancing technology for the betterment of all. Steele visited a rebuilt colony on a once devastated planet. He watched as children played under a sky that had once been filled with fire and smoke. "This is why we fought," he whispered to himself. "For their future. Preparing for the future. Preparing for the future." But Steele knew the peace was fragile. The scars of war ran deep, and new threats were on the horizon. The Alliance had to remain vigilant, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Steele stood on the bridge of his newly repaired ship, he looked out at the stars. They no longer seemed as sorrowful. Instead, they were a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. "We're not done yet," he said quietly. "The fight may be over, but the mission continues." And with that, the humans and their allies prepared for the next chapter in their journey, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. Humans changed the galaxy forever. Months passed since the final battle, but the echoes of war still reverberated across the galaxy. The Alliance worked tirelessly to rebuild, but beneath the surface, a transformation was taking place, not just in structures or technology, but in the very heart of galactic society. The humans, once considered insignificant, had not only helped win the war, but had left an indelible mark on the entire galaxy. Captain Marcus Steele found himself at the center of this change. He had become a symbol, not just of victory, but of resilience, ingenuity, and unity. But Steele never sought fame. His focus was on ensuring that the sacrifices made were honored through lasting peace. The rise of a new order. The Alliance, once a loose coalition of necessity, was now formalized into the Galactic Concord, a unified governing body aimed at preserving peace and fostering cooperation. Steele and Commander Ralvik were appointed as key advisors, their leadership in the war giving them the trust of countless worlds. "We can't just return to the way things were," Steele said during the first Concord meeting. "We need to build something better, something that lasts." Under their guidance, the Concord implemented policies promoting technological sharing, cultural exchange, and mutual defense. The humans' influence was clear in these initiatives, emphasizing adaptability, collaboration, and strategic thinking. Cultural shifts. Human culture, once unknown and underestimated, began to spread throughout the galaxy. Their art, music, and literature resonated with species from all corners of the stars. Stories of human perseverance and creativity inspired countless civilizations. But it wasn't just culture that spread, it was ideas. Humans introduced concepts of democracy, individual rights, and personal freedom that challenged long-standing traditions in many societies. Some species resisted, but others embraced these changes, leading to a wave of social and political reforms. On planets that had been under oppressive regimes, citizens rallied for change, citing the human spirit as their inspiration. "If the humans can fight the Zorak," one alien leader declared, "we can fight for our freedom." Technological advancements. Human ingenuity didn't stop at tactics and politics. Their technological innovations revolutionized many aspects of galactic life. By combining human creativity with alien technology, new advancements in medicine, energy, and space travel emerged. One of the most groundbreaking inventions was the quantum resonance drive, a propulsion system that allowed ships to travel faster and more efficiently than ever before. This drive was a direct result of human engineers working alongside alien scientists. Lieutenant Ava Chen, now a leading figure in technological development, spearheaded many of these projects. "The war taught us how to adapt," she said during a press conference. "Now we're using that adaptability to build a better future." The hidden threat resurfaces. Just as the galaxy began to settle into its new era, the hidden threat that Lieutenant Chen had detected months earlier began to reveal itself. Entire fleets disappeared without a trace, and strange anomalies appeared in sectors previously untouched by war. Steele, Ralvik, and Chen convened to analyze the latest reports. The data pointed to a force unlike anything they had encountered, something ancient and powerful. "This isn't the Zorak," Ralvik said, his voice low. "This is something worse." Steele stared at the holographic map, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "Then we prepare," he said firmly. "We've faced the impossible before. We can do it again." The legacy of humanity. As preparations began for this new, unknown threat, Steele reflected on how far they had come. Humanity had entered the galactic stage as underdogs, underestimated by nearly everyone. But through courage, intelligence, and unity, they had not only survived, they had thrived. The galaxy was different now. Borders were more open, species once hostile now worked side by side, and the lessons learned from humanity had become the foundation for a new era of cooperation. Steele knew the challenges ahead would be great, but he also knew that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt and persevere. "We're not just survivors," he said to his team as they prepared for the next mission. "We're builders. And together, we'll build a future that no one can take from us." The journey continues. With the galaxy forever changed, humanity and its allies set their sights on the horizon. New threats, new discoveries, and new adventures awaited them. But whatever came next, they were ready, because they were no longer just a collection of species fighting for survival. They were a united galaxy, and humanity had shown them the way. As Captain Marcus Steele stood on the bridge of his ship, staring into the vast expanse of stars, he felt a sense of hope. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. And with that, the ship jumped into hyperspace, leading the way into a future shaped by the courage and determination of the human spirit.